Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. Today we are talking about moving from doubt to intuitive clarity. The sun has moved into gate 57, which is the gate of intuitive clarity. It's one of my favorites. I have this gate and I also have the channel, so super familiar. It's one of the subtle, probably one of the more subtle frequencies in the human design system. It's the kind of energy that doesn't really shout. It sort of whispers, and it lives in the splenic center. And in the spleen, that's the body's ancient radar for like truth and timing. And when it's active, intuition rises a lot closer to the surface. However, before clarity, a lot of times comes doubt. And doubt can be tricky because it mimics intelligence. It sounds rational. It sounds protective and even responsible at times. And it can convince us that hesitation is safety when sometimes it's just the fear of trusting what we already know. And in human design, doubt and clarity are really two sides of the same spectrum, the shadow and the gift. Gate 57 teaches us that unease isn't necessarily proof that you're lost. It's the body's way of saying, pay attention. And you might notice the edges between fear and foresight blur a little bit. The quiet knowing lands in your bones just a little bit before the mind can catch up. And it might be feeling more pronounced this week. And I feel like this is where like your instinct meets your soul, where that same unease that you used to make you question yourself becomes a compass that guides you when you start working with your intuition more intentionally. Now, here is a caveat that a lot of people don't talk about. If your nervous system isn't regulated, those whispers of intuition are almost impossible to hear or discern from like legitimate fear. An ungrounded body mistakes every flicker of intuition for a threat. And that's why practices like breath work and Reiki and other forms of energy work can be so powerful, because they don't just calm you, they clear the static so that your natural signal can come through. Gate 57 is part of your design that says you already know. Now, whether you have Gate 57 active in your chart or not, everyone has an intuitive sense. You may find it easier to access, I think, if you have the gate or the channel. It may come through a bit stronger. But the challenge is to remember to trust it, especially when doubt feels louder than intuition, because you already know, right? And as we move through Libra season, a time that naturally pulls our awareness towards others, this gate reminds us to listen inward too, because clarity doesn't come from the noise around you. It comes from the stillness within you when you can get to that place. So today we're not chasing intuition like some, mystical prize. We're learning how to hear it and how to recognize the difference between anxiety and awareness, between noise and knowing. And because intuition isn't something you learn through, it's a lot like riding a bike, right? You know, we can talk about the mechanics of things, but until you do it and are very intentional about riding the bike and gain that sense of awareness about balance, it's hard to give it's hard to convey what it will feel like for you and your body because it's very individualized, right? But it is already built into your system. You've just been trained to mistrust it by logic a lot of the times. So in this episode, I want to explore what this may look like in real life, like how human design maps the way intuition speaks to the body, and give you some practical tips at the end of maybe how you can engage more intentionally with your intuition. So, you know, Gene Keys shows us that doubt isn't failure. It's fog before clarity sometimes. And shamanic and energetic wisdom teach us to clear the static so that we can hear what's already been speaking. So let's start with what I'll call the signal itself, the moment the intuition comes online and the body says, you know what, this is truth. And I do feel like calling it a signal sounds appropriate. This is the moment where something in you just knows, before the mind has had a chance to build a case file. And maybe it's a tug in your gut, maybe it's a sudden chill, maybe it's a sentence that drops into your awareness fully formed, like you just hear a voice. Intuition isn't rare, it's constant. The problem is that we've been taught to trust the noise instead of the knowing. And in human design, intuition wears different outfits depending on where it lives in your chart. And again, if you're splenic authority, that knowing is instant. It's quiet, it's efficient, it's really impossible to explain. If you're an emotional authority, clarity unfolds like the tide. It comes after the wave, not during it. If you're sacral, your body literally grunts the answer before you can speak. It's like that gut punch. And your chart isn't here to give you, I don't know, new abilities. It's here to translate your native language of intuition. Now, if you've got, like I have a defined splenic, emotional, and sacral. So I get intuitive hits in various different ways. You have to figure out what your way is, right? In the Gene Keys, the signal follows a pattern. It's the shadow gift and city. And Gate 57's journey runs from unease to intuition to clarity. You know, that discomfort you feel, it's not necessarily proof that there's something wrong. It's just static before the station locks in. You know, I'm using that old-timey. I'm old enough to remember when we had radios in cars that you would have to turn the dial and you would hear static, and then you would turn the dial and then you would get a station. So that I'm showing my age there. But when the body locks in, it shivers sometimes because truth is trying to move through. It's trying to move through all that static, and when it locks, it's like, ooh, this is it, right? Otherwise, it can get very tense from overthinking. You know, in energy work, intuition that sometimes shows up as a sensation like a warm flush across your chest when something's right, or a heaviness in your belly when it's not, or energy doesn't lie, it contracts or expands. And a lot of times that's what you'll feel like. I feel contracted, I feel expansive, depending on what the situation is. And when you tune into that, your whole system becomes a divination tool. And from a shamanism standpoint, I feel like intuition isn't just internal, it's relational. The land speaks, ancestors speak, spirit speaks. You're not listening with just your ears, but your presence. And a lot of times it's less I'm receiving guidance, although it can be that. But it almost feels more like I'm in conversation with life itself. I'm in conversation with the universe itself. And in depth psychology, intuition is the language of the unconscious, the dreams, the synchronicities, the slips of the tongue, the song that plays exactly when you need the reminder. It's the psyche's way of texting you when the mind's too loud to listen. So when I say the signal, I'm talking about all of it. The body, the spirit, the psyche, the unseen web between everything. Because intuition is multilingual. Doubt just means you haven't learned every dialect yet, right? So a quick practice on the signal is to take, I would recommend doing this alone so that you're not in anyone else's energetic field, is take a slow breath through the nose, exhale through the mouth, and ask, what does a yes feel like in my body? And where does that live? And what about a no? How does that land? And don't analyze it, just notice. And that's the start of your personal signal map. When you can name how truth feels in real time, you don't need a lot of external validation. You just need to keep your channel clear. So if the signal is your intuition in high def, if you will, the static is what distorts the channel. And here's the thing. Static is not evil. It's just feedback. It tells you when and where the system is overloaded or where you've tuned into someone else's frequency instead of your own. Now, in human design, static often shows up in the open centers. This is where knowing your design can be extremely helpful because those are the places where you're most sensitive to others. An undefined head picks up everyone else's questions, leaving you chasing answers that sometimes were not even yours to chase. An open solar plexus amplifies the emotional weather until you can't tell if the storm is yours or if it's borrowed for somebody else. Like when you have someone that has emotional authority defined, they're going to set the emotional stage in the room. My husband often looks at me and says, don't be putting that over here, because he has an undefined solar plexus, which is also the emotional center in human design. And when you have that going on, that's when your intuition gets mistaken for anxiety, because the signal is real, but it's just not yours. So in the Gene Keys language, we call this shadow frequency, right? Gate 63, the shadow of doubt, and the gate 57, the shadow of unease, are classic examples. Like I have the gate 63. It's in my personality, Mercury. So it's built into a lot of the way I communicate. I do question a lot, but I also trust internally, right? These are not flaws. They're part of the calibration process. Doubt asks, are you sure? Unease says, something's off. But when you don't slow down to listen, these voices can spiral into fear instead of refinement, instead of discernment. And that's what we want. We want discernment. We want refinement. Energetically, this is what happens when the nervous system isn't energetically, this is what happens when the nervous system is dysregulated, right? The body doesn't feel safe. And if the body doesn't feel safe, the intuition can't get through cleanly. You'll interpret every sensation as a threat, as I talked about before, instead of the truth. And that's not intuition. That's survival instinct wearing a spiritual filter. And there's a place for that. Don't get me wrong. If you're being chased by a lion, It's all about the instinct, right? Get away. Now, from a shamanic lens, I feel like static is fragmentation, maybe. Like perhaps when too much of your energy is scattered in worse, and that could be in worry or comparison or self-doubt. When that happens, you lose coherence. You stop hearing the voice of spirit and start hearing the echo of every unhealed story you've ever lived. And through shamanic healing, that's where things like power retrieval, soul retrieval, it's what brings back those fragments home. And with them, a lot of times after a power retrieval or a soul retrieval, I feel like intuition gets significantly sharper. That quiet clarity that has been missing just suddenly comes in stronger after the integration process. Now, from the psychological side, static is the mind trying to protect the ego's identity. Because if you actually followed intuition, you might have to change something. And the ego hates that. So it keeps analyzing, looping, seeking one more sign, one more reading, one more logical reason. Now, you can feel static in your body. It's that tightness in your jaw before you answer. It's the doom scrolling, really. It's the moment you sense truth, but you immediately argue with it. In the South, we call it the Southern denial. It's like, I don't want to see that. So perhaps a quick reset practice in this area is, put your hand over your heart and another on your lower belly. And take one deep breath. And again, do this when you're not in anybody else's energetic field. And say, what's mine right now? And then let the exhale clear what's not. Like breathe out what's not yours. Letting go what's not mine. You don't have to name it. You just have to return to your own field. Because every time you choose presence over panic, you turn static back into signal. I think this is, I've known a lot of guys in special forces, and one of the things that they talk about is presence over panic. And on the surface level, I think people think, and I think that there is some validity to this, they're training so they can respond instead of react. But I think that all the guys that I've talked to that have seen some really challenging circumstances in that line of work have also talked about there's a certain level of tapping into their intuition as well, in being able to trust that when the shit hits the fan. And I think that is one of the advantages of doing the training for their nervous system, is so that they have both that skill set and that intuitive gift online with a real sharp tone. So when the static quiets, what's left is it's a bit of it like a symphony, right? The moment between when intuition and body and action start playing that same tune. And in human design, this is where clarity becomes movement, right? Generators feel the hum of their gut and respond, and manifestors get that spark and they inform, and projectors wait for the right invitation and speak truth when it lands, and reflectors, they track the rhythm of the moon. And following your type's timing shouldn't feel like obedience. It's how you keep the music in tune. And the gene keys remind us every time you live in the gift instead of the shadow, that's your frequency at its highest optimal operation, right? Gifts 57's gift of intuition matures into clarity when you trust the process more than trusting your best laid plans. And that's when synchronicity stops feeling rare and starts showing up with a lot more consistency. And it becomes more natural. Of course I'm going to get this signal. Of course things are going to be in more alignment because you're operating at your optimal frequency, right? You're fulfilling that natal promise. Now, from a shamanic lens, integration happens through relationship, right? That's why we offer gratitude to the land. That's why we light a candle for our ancestors. That's why we listen to the wind. We talk to a tree. When you stay in dialogue with the unseen, intuition becomes community, not just a performance thing that you can post on TikTok or Instagram. And through energy work, integration it's a lot like spiritual hygiene, I think. Clearing your field, receiving, acting, clearing again, that simple rhythm of, it's almost like the inhale and exhale. It keeps your intuition crisp instead of clogged up. Now, one day a practice for this could be follow one intuitive nudge without demanding proof. And don't try to over-interpret it. It just act, just observe, just write down what unfolds. It's not about being right, because you're going to be wrong some too. It's about rebuilding trust through repetition, because intuition deepens through your own type of evidence, because you begin to trust yourself more, so it shows up more. Each time you follow it and life meets you halfway, the nervous system relaxes. That static fades. That signal gets stronger. Because maybe intuition isn't something you build necessarily, it's something you stop interrupting. So take that with you this week and notice what expands and what contracts and where your knowing hums underneath the noise. But before we close, let's get a little bit more practical, because clarity that never lands in action, it's a different type of noise, right? So let's give you a few ways to bring this work off the podcast and into your life this week. Okay. All right, we're going to have, 3 or 5. Number 1, create your own signal map, all right? Start tracking how your intuition actually feels. When something turns out to be true, notice what your body did first. Go back and think about it for a sec. Feel, and more importantly, feel into it. Was there a temperature shift? Did your gut pull? Did you just hear a subtle yes? Did you hear a subtle no? Explore the clairs. And within a week or two, you're going to start seeing a pattern of your truth emerge. Your body's native yes or no language. It could be something that simple, like just focus on the yes or no. You certainly can get intuitive hips that are much more expansive than that. But maybe for a week or two, just focus on yes or no. Number 2, practice the 24-hour listening fast. Okay? For one day, don't ask anyone else what they think. No advice. Don't even pull any cards. No polls on Instagram. Just you, your thoughts, your body, and the quiet. Because the other thing is, intuition can get drowned out by constant consultation with the other. Okay? Now I pull cards all the time. But if you're using an oracle card as a replacement because you don't trust yourself, you're not going to get a clean pull there anyway, right? Let your own frequency, like, just do this for 24 hours. Let your own frequency reassert itself. And number 3, use the power of the pause. Before saying yes and sending out the email or over-explaining, just stop. One breath. Is this clarity or compulsion? Is this clarity or avoidance? Is this clarity or people-pleasing? That micro pause is where doubt transforms into discernment. It transforms into refinement. It shows where it's where fear shows its cards and the truth has a little bit more space to speak. Number 4, ground the intuitive hit in real time. Every intuitive message asks for embodiment. If you get a hit, do something small to anchor it. Like, if you're in a space, maybe light that candle, take a step, write a note, make a call. Spirit meets you through momentum and not just theory. So when you get that hit, take the action. Number 5, and I think this is really important, clear your field nightly. And I've said this on the podcast before. It's probably been a while. But think of this as like energetic flossing. You can do something elaborate, like, taking a salt bath or a Reiki sweep or, using rattles or sounds or whatnot. But before you go to sleep at night, being very intentional with, I call my energy back through space and time and release what is not mine, can be a very powerful exercise, because you can't trust your intuition if you're full of other people's energy. So those are some things for you to play with over the next couple of weeks. Intuition gets stronger the more you interact with it. Every time you respond to a nudge, the feedback loop tightens, your doubt quiets, your nervous system starts to believe you mean it this time. So this week or 2, track your signals, hold your pauses, act on one small knowing without demanding proof. That's how intuition moves from concept to companion, right? Clarity isn't found in certainty. It's built through constant conversations with your own truth. This is the foundation of, this is why we keep coming back to ironclad self-trust and practical integration. Now, if today's conversation sparked something in you, please share this episode with someone who's been wrestling with their own doubt. Sometimes clarity spreads best through stories we pass along. And if you're ready to understand how your energy moves through your unique human design, you can order your energetic blueprint report through the link in the show notes. It is the perfect step for learning how your system is wired to recognize truth and to trust it, along with figuring out what your gifts are, where other people have the most influence on you, and where you have the most influence on others. So until next time, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration and it always starts with self-trust.